All right, mates, welcome back. JL Scott Fishing and Eats. Hope everybody's doing well this week. We're going to break into the non-tidal fisheries management report, which are readily available online for all those who would like to print those out and just have them. We are actually headed to the James River this weekend coming up. We've got the Virginia Outdoor Sportsman Show in Doswell Meadow Event Park, which is going to run from Friday until Sunday, 1 p.m. Friday. I think 1 to 7 Friday, then opens at 9 on Saturday and opens at 10 on Sunday for the Virginia Outdoor Sportsman Show. But we're going to be fishing, hopefully if the weather remains like this, get into some smallies at the fall line, above the fall line in Richmond, Virginia, and head out there for that. We got temperatures dropping below 80 degrees, which is a welcome change. It's been well over the 90s for far too long. But it is August, so, that's just the way it is in the mid-Atlantic. We get these mild stretches, and then we get this humid August. So it'll be interesting to see. You can also check out the July Virginia citation smallies and largemouth submissions have been logged up on the Virginia Angler Recognition Program website. You can check that out. I'll do another video. May not get to it before the show, but we've got a whole bunch of managery reports coming out that we're going to get into going into the fall. Okay. The first one, we're going to talk about the James River. We're going to talk about the James River today because we have a 100-mile plus river float coming up that we are excited about capturing the James River. Don't fret. I know you guys in the DMV, we are going to do a fall Upper Potomac float. And we'll hit all the points that we hit in all the separate videos throughout the year to kind of bring it all together in large swags of the Upper Potomac. So we're going to do the same thing that like we've done before in the past. And we are going to actually try and put together a fall October Susquehanna River float, 3-day Susquehanna River float. And it will be Susquehanna that you have never seen on my channel, and you probably haven't seen on a lot of the other major guys that are probably kayak anglers that fish Hobie events on the Susquehanna, because it's portions of the Susquehanna that are never in play for Hobie when they fish on the Susquehanna. They always cut it off at Sunbury. They leave the north and they leave the western branch of Susquehanna out. But this October, portions of both are going to be in a Bass Master Kayak Series event. So what we're hoping to do is to get this float scheduled Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I don't think that event is a 2-day. I think it's a 1-day. So maybe the third day of that river float will be during the Bass event. And so we're trying to work out the logistics for that because it's always fun times fishing that part of the Susquehanna. I'm not going to tell you where yet, just because. But we're going to go up there here in the next couple weeks to do a preliminary float down, check out the access points, and map all that out first because we have not done one on that part of the Susquehanna. We've only done them on the Harrisburg, Liverpool, Duncannon, Harrisburg area. So we're going to do a totally different this fall. So we got something coming up. But let's get into this. Non-tidal James River Port Virginia DNR has come out, has dropped timely for us, and we get some ideas. We know pretty much what our 100-mile float is going to be, which is going to run from the confluence of the James River, where the Jackson and the cow pasture come into the James River. As close to that, probably Iron Gate, as close to that as we're going to get, and then we're going to go take it all the way to outside of probably to Snowden, and then hop on the other side of Lynchburg, just because of all the dams and stuff. It's like 5. It's just a lot of portaging, a lot of getting out, a lot of more time off the water than on the water in that section because there's so many dams and everything that you have to navigate and pick back up like at Joshua Falls or below, and then run all the way to Richmond. They're close to west of the city of Richmond. And there's tons of water, beautiful scenery. It's just a great float. that we'll do over a couple days. We'll have some overnights. We'll have some probably, um, campsite cooking, that kind of stuff, middle of the island, middle of the river, all that good stuff. So it'll really, really be great. So we're going to start with Upper James. Okay, non-tidal James River stretches approximately 250 miles. We know that. Remember the fall line that breaks the non-tidal from the tidal. The tidal James River is well-known fishery for its largemouth bass. Smallies basically are in and around Richmond, Virginia, and then that's the end of their territorial range. Whereas above the fall line, all the way to the cow pasture in Jackson, you do have some largemouth, but it's predominantly a smallmouth fishery, along with some other fisheries. Remember, the Upper James, we'll get to in a second, is an outstanding muskie fishery in the upper James. Further up portions, Eagle Rock, all that stuff up there. Again, this stretch of the James River is long but considered a top smallmouth bass fishery. We know that. In addition to smallmouth, bass anglers will find opportunities to catch sunfish, catfish throughout the river, as well as muskie up in the river's upper end, so out west. Okay, doesn't mean you're not going to get into a muskie somewhere along the middle river, but it's just not. They're not as prolific. That's a rarity, so that's a big time feat. Again, this is it's from a biological perspective, not exactly necessarily the angler perspective. Sometimes they are in unison, sometimes they are in opposing. They're in opposition to each other in terms of what anglers think or seen compared to what the biology reports are. So the Upper James River, this report is sticking with Lick Run to Lynchburg, to the city of Lynchburg. It's a great fishing area. There are a lot of events. You can find a lot of trails that'll fish portions of that area as well. Again, like I said, beginning at the confluence of the Jackson and Cowpasture Rivers near Iron Gate, the Upper James River flows approximately 90 miles downstream to the city of Lynchburg. Okay, that is a long stretch by anyone's imagine. So we know that that's 90 miles, which would be that 100-mile, right? Which would be that 100-mile we're talking about. So to go from after Lynchburg to Richmond, that's another stretch, right? Smallie bass, muskie catfish, rock bass. That's right, rock bass, perch, white bass, rock bass. I think all that kind of like that, those hybrids down in that part of the state. I'm not sure if they have the sauger and the saw guy like the Staunton does, Roanoke River. But it'd be interesting to look into. So here's the map of that area. You can see you're up. Okay. Eagle Rock, lots of muskie fishing up here, mates. Okay. And you see that run all the way down to Snowden. Remember, right before Snowden, you've got the confluence of the Maury River with the James River. And the Maury River is another up-and-coming river, for sure. More similar, I think, to the Shenandoah than a lot of people may associate it with. I don't think it's an easy association with the James River by any means, just my opinion. I know a lot of people differ that. I think it's more in terms of the quality of the fish that we're seeing in the Shenandoah. But the Maury is starting to see an uptick in its density of smallmouth and in particular its size. We will do the Maury River fishery management report as well. So you want to check that out. I'll put all these in a playlist on YouTube if I get around to that to make it a lot easier so you can get this information and you can save that. All right, let's look at the smallmouth bass breakdown. Upper James River smallmouth bass. Smallmouth bass, the most popular sport fish anglers seek in the James River, is the most abundant species collected in fall sampling 2022. So all this data is based off of the late fall 2022 sampling. They will probably have another one coming up in the fall of 2023, and then we'll get that report in 2024. That's usually how it works. In 2022, 848 smallmouth bass ranging from 3 to 21 inches were collected in their sampling efforts. And an above-average spawn in 2021 has resulted in better numbers of smallmouth bass ranging from 7 to 9 inches. That is important, okay? Approximately 70% of those bass are considered catchable size, all right? Anglers can expect to see some fish larger than 12 inches as they continue to persist with Goodyear's class 6 to 10 years. That's their range of 6 to 10 years old at that size contingent. However, poor spawning success over the past 6 years has caused a noticeable decline in smallmouth bass numbers. Recreational usage of the upper bay has become extremely popular. Anglers specifically targeting smallmouth bass should consider fishing in less frequented sections of the river. So you have more canoeing outfits, more floating outfits, more tubing, all those kinds of things, what that is actually referencing. And they are. I mean, it's an incredible fishery to get out on the water. We see that in a lot of areas of the Virginia fisheries. It's big tourist, it's ecotourism, it's huge. You just have to be able to get the different sections, and it's very, very true. Keep in mind, if you go on the Virginia Angler Recognition Program, the anglers in this part of the James River are reporting their citations. So you're going to see a lot of Upper James River citation smallies, which is 20 inches or more in the state of Virginia. So again, keep that in mind when you look at that and you look at the sampling, because sometimes they can be okay. They can be not going to be the same necessarily. Remember, they just they surveyed a specific section, okay, sections that they're targeting, right? So length in inches, number and lengths of smallmouth collected from the Upper James River fall 2022 juvenile bass, less than 7 inches, represented with the red bars. So there's juveniles in red, while adult smallmouth bass are shown in green bars. Current regulations protect smallmouth bass between 14 and 22 inches. That means you got thrown back. Do everyone throw them back? No, they don't. Not everybody does, okay? So keep that in mind. We know that to be true. And you can see how we've got really great classes in here at 14, 15, 16, okay? Now, if you're fishing in kayak fishing tournaments, for example, most of the time, there's a minimum, probably 12 inches, depending on your series, depending on your event. There are some, it's 8 inches, okay? So keep that in mind, because when you look at that, when tournament directors look at what is the density of the species we're talking about in the particular river that we have assigned, and it's important that they assign sections that have surveyed well, in my opinion. That is how I would do it, because you want fish to be caught, right? And so look at the 7s and 8s. Okay, lots of 7s and 8s, okay? So it would make sense for a series to make 8 inches. I know that's not, okay, I know I'll get a lot of heat for that. Like, it's still a fish caught, and you are still in a fishing tournament. Okay, so I'm a big advocate on cumulative. I'm a big advocate on you did the work, you caught a fish. Obviously it matters if it's a 20 incher, that's a big deal. Okay, but it equally matters if you catch 8s and 10s and 12s and all that stuff. So I understand it's tournament fishing and all that. So I kind of like the clubs that include that. Even if you have a Dink Award, smallest fish award, is every bit as fun as the Big Bass Award. Okay, I would guys would beat their chest up by getting the Dink Award, right? Every bit as much as getting the payday for the Big Bass Award. I love it when I see trails award people who catch the smallest fish, because they still caught a fish. The majority of adult smallmouth bass collected in 2022 were samples between 7 and 12 inches, like we talked about. Approximately 19% of the adult smallmouth collected were 14 inches or more. So roughly 20% of the bass surveyed in the fishery, again, when I say fishery, understand it's just where they're surveying, and there's a lot of assumptions get made that this somehow is indicative of the whole river system. It ain't, okay? So just remember that, okay? Because all these sections are different, and their population density are different. We know that about the Upper Potomac in the DMV. We know that about the Shenandoah versus the South Fork and the Main Stem and the North Fork, okay? Okay, so just keep that in mind. That 20% of where they surveyed the adult fish were greater than 14 inches, which is good. It's almost a third, less than a third of the fishery are adult. So again, think about that. After collecting fish with electric fishing equipment, catch rates are calculated in terms of fish collected per hour. Catch rates of adult smallmouth bass averaged 51 per hour. That means they electrofish surveyed roughly 50 fish an hour, which is slightly greater than the long-term average of 47. So again, from a metric perspective, it's greater than normal. Okay, so the density extrapolated from that is the fishing density should be better, higher, more fish in the river, even though we're taking into account poor spawning classes. But remember, mates, you have to kind of take the second step here. Just because we have a poor spawning class in terms of rate of spawn, right, and survivability. When you're starting with less fish and then you have that problem, it's significant. But if you're starting with a greater sized population and you have that same problem, it's almost mitigated. Okay, so just that could be why we're still seeing an uptick, okay, in some of the fish. All right, it's because even though maybe they've been part of a poor spawning class, there were still a lot of numbers. Remember, the more adult fish there are in the fishery, the greater the numbers are going to be at spawn. Okay, potential numbers anyway. Here are your smallmouth bass catch rate. Okay, annual catch of adult smallmouth greater than 7 inches. This takes you all the way back to 2000 to 2022, and you can see that or just right there. Okay. Now remember, we're got to take into account weather events. Okay, high water events, major flooding events. Okay, the James River has suffered tremendous amount of flooding events in my lifetime. Not sure they've had one, like as bad, as decimating as probably the 80s, I think, in the 80s, which is why afterward in Richmond, they built a new flood wall and all that, because all downtown Richmond, the bottom, Shockoe Bottom, all got flooded in the 80s. So now they have a flood wall down in Richmond. But fluctuation in catch rates over time are likely due to spawning success, like we talked about, juvenile survival in recent years. Smallmouth bass less than 6 inches in the fall are juveniles and usually 5 to 18 months old. Okay, so roughly last year, either this class or last year's class. Think of it that way. Juvenile survival appears to be the best in years with moderate June river flows. Did not have any flooding in June, July this year on the James River. Okay, did not have any flooding on the upper Potomac. Okay, or the Shenandoah or the Maury. Okay, we had some high water at times, but not flooding. Nothing that rated flood at Front Royal, for example, or Richmond or Lynchburg, places like that. Since 2000, juvenile catch rates have varied from 6 to 65 per hour. Upper James juvenile smallmouth bass catch. Annual catch of juvenile smallmouth bass less than 7 inches from 2022 in the Upper James River. The red line represents the historic average catch rate over time. That's your catch rate typically per hour. Okay, so that tells you. You've got some outliers in there. Okay. Those interested in sunfish, I like to pay attention to what's happening with the sunfish because a lot of times that's a forage species, okay, for a lot of our other fish that we like to go fishing for. So it's kind of interesting to see what their density is, and sometimes that will signal the overall health of that ecosystem. Is your forage species, things like your forage species, whether it be the small part of the bass class of family of fish, would be sunfish, or then all the way down to your minnows, your shiners, your crawl, your grass, all that kind of stuff factors into the overall health of the ecosystem. So it's very, 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 very important. And here's your sunfish, really quick. Sunfish, rock bass, redfish sunfish, green sunfish, bluegill, all kind of lumped into that sunfish totals. And you can see the inches. And then the numbers collected. Catfish, always an interesting topic. You guys know the way I feel if you follow me on Facebook, JL Scott Fishing Eats. I'm not a guy who wants to blame other species in an ecosystem. We're the biggest culprit, okay? We don't want to admit it. We got egos. We want to beat our chest up about it. But let's face it, man-made occurrences, man-made things outside of Mother Nature's flooding is the second, if not the worst, impact on any fishery. It's what we do. We build homes on lakes and reservoirs. We build homes on rivers. We dump into rivers. We build businesses on rivers. We build farms on rivers and the runoff. All the stuff, pesticides, all man-made, created, right? We created pesticides. All that stuff is us, okay? But there's always that element where the people want to point the finger and blame. They don't want to point themselves. They want to blame the snakehead. They want to blame the flathead. They want to blame the catfish as being invasive. And I want people to understand these fish have been here forever. The New River, the James River. James River is the American founding river. Okay, think about that. So, from our nation's existence, the first river discovered is the James River. Okay, it's our founding river. So, from the time our country was discovered, okay, and created, there have been largemouth bass and smallmouth bass having to deal with things. There were invasive species in that time frame. Okay. Now there were a lot more sturgeon, a lot more other species that over time we as men decimated. Okay. Again, it's a balancing act. So I'm not, I don't subscribe to the view that flatheads and snakeheads and because systems, Mother Nature has a way of working out its balance over time inside the fishery. So I just don't. Now catfish anglers and those things again. Okay, that's a human thing. What our banks look like, what our with all that stuff. That is a human thing that we need to regulate and fix ourselves. 74 channel catfish and 41 flatheads. So that's what 74 and 41. Over 120 catfish were collected. Okay. There are abundant numbers of catfish in the 15 to 25-inch range with the potential for larger flathead catfish. Catfish can be difficult to collect using standard electrofishing equipment, really because they're just they're deeper or they're in holes. So don't be discouraged by lack of large fish collected. Some of the best numbers of largest size flats can be found downtown Lynchburg. Ever notice that? That's something that someone should do a biological study on. Because I see that all the time. It's almost as if the flatheads are attracted to man, like our environmental impact on a river in our cities, like trash, food, waste, whatever it is. Because I find that everywhere. Like like the flathead issue is big in Richmond City, big in Lynchburg City. It's big in the cities where now some people could argue, well, Jay, that's where they got introduced. That's where they were introduced by us. Okay, like that could be an argument that man introduced them in the cities, and that anglers somehow moved them from one to another. That's always an argument that gets made for invasive species. We've heard it with the snakeheads and people like that. Always gets we're seeing it now with spotted bass, for example. That people are moving it and transporting it, and maybe that's true. Until we see a lot of prosecutions, until we see a lot of court cases, until we see a lot of that, I don't know how prolific that is. And that may not even be an indication of how prolific it is. Maybe it is really, really prolific in places like Carolina, into Virginia with the spotted bass and with the cats. But it's just interesting how the cities always seems to come. I don't know why that is from a species standpoint. Maybe they just don't leave because they've got a consistent driver of food, kind of just because the old adage is they'll eat anything. Some of the best numbers, larger size flathead cats can be found downtown Lynchburg. Like I said, anglers fishing from the bank or the boat can land trophy-sized flatheads. We see that in DMV, Washington, D.C., from the Virginia side of the river, the Potomac as it goes through. Same thing. Trophy-sized catfish. Taken from the Virginia side into the Potomac River and the Maryland side. There are even a few blue catfish now making their way up the river from downstream to Scotts Mill Dam in Lynchburg. Okay, they'll figure out a way. I mean, we build these dams. Dams are not natural, mates. Okay, dams are man-made. They're not natural. So these fish have to figure out a way. Upper James River catfish. There's your population, length, density, number and size of channel catfish and flathead catfish collected on the Upper James in fall of 2022. That was the last one. And you can see the size number collected in your inches. So the most are collected are in that 17 to 18 and that 20 to 21 range. Okay. Muskie, Upper James, phenomenal fishery. Upper James New River, two of probably the best muskie fishing rivers in the country, in my opinion. Natural rivers. And the largest and most challenging fish, muskies are collected in almost all sampling sites and were most abundant in pool areas. That's deeper water mains. 21 muskies ranging from 14 to 43 inches were collected during the fall survey. In 2021, 6 muskies were collected less than 16 inches in length. Muskie and size were considered young of the year and reflect a successful spawn. from the spring of 22. Most extensive. So that was that year's spawning class. They get big that fast. That's the way you look at it. Most extensive muskie sampling is conducted during January and March of each year. We know that. The water's colder. We see that with walleye as well. When the water gets cold, in a lot of our river systems that contain walleye or contain muskie, usually don't find the smallmouth bass. The smallmouth bass tend, as we drop below 40 degrees, probably around 42, you see the smallmouth activity in terms of migration and movement really slow down. Okay, they're hunkering down. They're stationary on their fine rocks. They're going to stick to the thermals of the rocks. That's when you tend to see muskies being active and walleyes being more active. Okay, is in that cold water, and that's when you can catch some really, really big ones. It's been interesting. I'd have to ask. You'd have to contact someone, a guy, one of the most premier guides in Virginia is Sam Scott from Blue Ridge Muskie. To ask him, in terms of fall muskie fishing, and then that early winter, or I guess early year, New Year winter, January, February period. Like, what's the, which is the better one? Upper James muskies, you can see that. There you go. Look at the lengths in that. Look at that. 44s, 45s, 41s. That's crazy. It's a crazy, crazy fish, for sure, that you want to get on. Middle James River, okay, the Middle River. Think east of Lynchburg, west of Richmond. That's me. That's what I think about when I think of the Middle James River. I grew up in Richmond after living in Northern Virginia for the first 12 years of my life. And I consider Richmond to be the middle of the river because it's the fall line, right? Tidal to your east, non-tidal to your west, right? Okay. So it's 130 miles. The Middle James River consists of a 130-mile portion of the river between Lynchburg and Bocher's Dam, right where I grew up, okay? Just upstream of Richmond, okay? It's a 130-mile stretch. So realistically, we could do 2 100-plus mile float trips of the James River, and it'll all be in smallmouth migration territorial range. It's crazy. All right, series of shallow rocky riffles, sleep pool. Middle River offers modest smallmouth bass action, fair numbers of sunfish, and abundance of catfish. I actually think there's more. I actually think, in my opinion, if you follow my Facebook page, you can see the anglers that I follow, the anglers that I try to cover them much. I think around Lynchburg and west, the smallies are bigger. I think there's more of a concentration of larger smallmouth, year class. I think in the Middle River, there's more fish. I just don't think they're as big. I think that, to me, is where, on average, when you look at these, I could be wrong, but I just think when you get into them a lot, you catch more consistent 18s, 17, 18, 19s, west, okay, of Lynchburg or right in around Lynchburg. And then as you get to like Middle River, Scottsville, Cartersville, Columbia, Maidens, all the way down, Robius, all the way down, it's more 13, 14s, and 15s, and a lot of them. Doesn't mean the big ones aren't there, okay? But that's your middle stretch, okay? James River State Park, which is above Lynchburg, okay, on the river all the way to Richmond. So let's see how they fared. Smallmouth bass were predominant spot fall of 22, 589 bass. So, okay, it's less than what they collected. So that disproves my experience on the water, okay? Because in the survey, they collected more west of Lynchburg, okay, in that upper section than they did in the middle section. So they collected more fish, okay, in that section. So that discounts how my own personal experience on the river when I fish in different areas is I tend to catch more fish in the middle section. I tend to catch bigger fish in the upper sections. All right, so this is going to end part 1. We're going to come back with part 2. We're going to talk about the Middle River, James River Fishery Management Report.